again, everyone, and welcome to High School Huddle. I am Chad Harberts. It is finally the summer sports season, the standalone part of the summer sports season. I know baseball and softball have been playing for a few weeks, but finally they have it all to themselves. Spring sports season has finally ended, and we're moving on to baseball and softball. And we've got a unique show for you tonight on High School Huddle. We're going to talk some baseball and softball and get you caught up on the rankings, but also our producer extraordinaire, John Gunderson, is going to come on in a few minutes, and we are going to talk about this unbelievable legislation that just passed this week, where eighth graders will be eligible to play all varsity sports in Iowa starting on August 1st. It's really a wild thing that came down on short notice, and I know John and I are going to spend a majority of the show talking about that because it's wild. It really is. It's debatable on both sides. It hasn't been very well thought through, but we're going to talk about all that in just a few minutes. But let's get you caught up first with softball and baseball. They've been going on for almost a month now. They've been playing quite a few games, but they've been sharing the spotlight with girls soccer and state track and field and all that stuff. Now it's time for baseball and softball to stand alone. So let's start with the softball rankings, the most current ones from the Girls Athletic Union. Class 5A, Waukee Northwest on top of the poll at 19-1. Not a big surprise there. Waukee Northwest is the defending state champions in 5A softball. And of course, you look around there and you see the who's who of girls sports in this state. Ankeny Centennial, Valley, DCG, Southeast Polk. It's going to be a very competitive field in 5A this year. Down in 4A, ADM has retaken the top spot at 14-4. Carlisle drops from 1 to 2. Fort Dodge, they're loving that fact. They've got a great team this year because the state titles, the state championships are held in Fort Dodge every single year. In 3A, Williamsburg up on top 19-1. And lurking back there in fifth spot, Van Meter at 13-4. Van Meter is the defending state champions in Class 3A. In 2A, Louisa Muscatine is number 1. Interstate 35 Truro right there, number 2. West Lyon 10-3, number 3. So some good teams there. In 2A, Wapsie Valley at number 8. Wapsie Valley was in the state field a year ago. And in Class 1A, Clarksville, the defending state champions, are 12-1. And by the way, Clarksville is playing the entire season without Paige Campman, who tore an ACL at the end of the basketball postseason, isn't playing this year. She batted .486 last year. She was their best player a year ago when they won state, and still Clarksville is 12-1 and ranked number 1 in Class 1A in softball. Let's switch over to baseball and what's going on there. 4A in baseball, Sioux City East above the top of the poll, 22-1 so far this year. 22-1 in baseball is an incredible record. I don't care what level you're at. It's really good. Indianola, Cedar Rapids Prairie hanging around there in 4A. And 3A, Wahlert Catholics on top at 17-2. And all the regulars in there, MOC Floyd Valley. Solon's always pretty good in baseball. Bishop Heelan's always good in baseball. They're all hanging around in that poll. 2A, Pleasantville. Pleasantville's playing some great baseball right now at 15-1. Roland Story is 19-1. Beckman Catholic, Grundy Center's hanging back. They had a weird loss to AGWSR, but Grundy Center's playing some great baseball. And 2A might be the most competitive of the 4 divisions in high school baseball. Then down in Class 1A, Coon Rapids Bayard's on the top of the poll. St. Ansgar, the defending state champs, are hanging around in 3rd at 12-2. So that'll get you caught up on the baseball and the softball, and we'll get more in depth with that going forward now, because those are the only 2 sports we've got going on in the state for the rest of the summer until fall football starts up and volleyball and all that stuff. But we want to get you caught up there. We'll start getting you some more highlights of those teams, some more coverage of those teams. I'm going out to a softball game tomorrow night, actually, to check some things out. But we want to take our first break because this show is about something unique that really went down in Iowa. 8th graders will now play varsity sports at all levels, all sports starting on August 1st. And we've got to talk about that. So we're going to take our first break. We're going to come back. We're going to get John Gunderson on here as well. And we're going to talk about 8th graders playing all the varsity sports in Iowa right after this.
Welcome to Deep in the Valley, a Missouri Valley basketball podcast. I'm Chris Bowser, joined by Brian Dutler. And this is your home for everything happening across the Valley. We appreciate everyone spending some time with us talking Valley basketball. If you enjoyed the show, please share, subscribe, and follow along as we cover everything Valley basketball all year long, from Cedar Falls to Des Moines, Nashville to Normal, Carbondale to Chicago. This is a league rich in college basketball history and programs that have made a lasting impact on the sport. We'll be here every week to tell those stories. We'll see you next time, deep in the Valley.
Welcome back to High School Huddle. Let's bring in John Gunderson right now. John, how are you doing?
Doing great, Chad. Welcome back from Vegas. I know you're on vacation all week.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And happy Father's Day to you.
Same to you.
Thank you. While I was on vacation, the Board of Education approved an emergency rule that 8th graders can now play all varsity sports in Iowa starting August 1st. We know 8th graders have been playing baseball and softball for some time, and we know the reasons why there. We'll talk about that. But just on first blush, just looking at it and hearing about it, I hate it and I understand it at the same time.
Yeah, I have a little bit of both, Chad. And I think today we're going to talk about the pros and the cons. And I think it's trying to help the participation levels that all the sports are dealing with. But I think it's got lots of ramifications at all levels. And I can't wait to talk about it with you here.
So let's start with the beginning, which is 8th graders have been able to play baseball and softball in Iowa for a long time. And we know why, because here's what's happened in baseball and softball for the last 40 or 50 years. A lot of schools, their seniors, not all of them, but some of them don't go out for baseball and softball their senior year for various reasons. Number one, they've graduated. Number two, they might be playing a college sport and they might be going to college early. Instead of playing their high school softball or baseball season, they're going to go to school early. Maybe they want to just take vacation. Maybe they need to work to make some money to get ready to go to college. But for a long time, underclassmen have been able to play baseball and softball. And I was a varsity baseball player in Grundy Center as a sophomore. I probably wasn't good enough, but again, a bunch of seniors didn't go out or were on the varsity. I was a guy who was only playing if we were up 10 runs or down 10 runs. But I was a product of the fact that some of the seniors didn't go out for baseball that year. So it happens. We get that. Now Iowa has decided to extend it to all sports starting on August 1st. There's a number of things I don't like about this. There's a lot of things I don't like about it, but I'm going to tell you why. I'm going to walk you through it. Number one, it's government overreach at its worst. And here's why I'm going to say that. The Iowa High School Athletics Association, the Boys Association, was not for this. The Iowa Girls High School Athletic Union was not for this. The two organizations this state has, whose only job is to legislate and manage high school sports and protect the safety of high school athletes, not for this. Yet the Board of Education waits till summer to pass emergency legislation, makes it effective August 1st, and then says to every school district, all 340 high schools in the state, here, we're dumping this on you. It's the law, and you guys figure it out from here. It is the absolute worst thing about government. They didn't fix a problem. They created 10 more and then left somebody else to figure them out. And I hate that. I hate that about government overreach into high school sports.
Yeah, Chad, I think as we talk about this, I think there's more far-reaching implications of this. Hey, I just moved back from Georgia 2 years ago. And when I was coaching middle school football down there in 7th grade, that was not associated with the high school. But all sports started inside the association at 8th grade to 12th. That's one of those states where you can be an 8th grader and play up. And I think that maybe is an outcome of this. They've eliminated 7th grade from the mix run by the state into club sports, and 8th through 12th is easier to manage. So I can see that being some of it from a Board of Education thinking, hey, we'll put it in there. But I think the big issue is they're trying to stem participation issues. And the fact of the matter is, especially on the girls' side, there's some incredibly mature, great eighth grade girls that can play up in basketball, golf, cross country, tennis, bowling, track and field that can compete at that level. So I think that's potentially driving it too. I think on the boys' side, it's much harder to compete as an eighth grader against a senior.
And the government spin started immediately with comments like, not all 13-year-olds are built the same, just like not all 18-year-olds are built the same, and all this other stuff. And there's this misunderstanding that this is about the small schools. This is about the BCLUWs and the OAB CIGs and the schools have had to combine over the years for participation purposes. But let me tell you something that I know is tried and true. We do have a participation problem, and it's because people are having less babies. That's just simple math. My father was the youngest of 10. I am the oldest of 4. My son is one of 1.
Yep.
Okay. That's a very real problem that we're having all across America, is there's simply less students than there ever have been before. And I get that. I do get that. I do understand it. However, it's also, you cannot make an argument against this, that public education has been under attack for roughly 5 or 6 decades in every way. Every state in the country, basically, maybe except for Tennessee and Hawaii, has passed legalized gambling, and the money is going to go to the state's education fund. And let me tell you something, it's not happening in any state in the country. If Iowa had $50 million for education before gambling came in, and then casinos created 50 million more, Iowa doesn't suddenly have $100 million for education. They still just have 50 because the government takes the other 50 away and spends it somewhere else. So all this, we're going to add this money on to help education. And now we're privatizing schools because for some reason we think that if schools become for-profit things, that'll make things better. Public school teachers, public school educators, public schools in general have been under attack for 6 decades. I don't care who's in charge of what level of government. Public education has been under attack. And this just seems like another way we're undermining what the schools are trying to do by passing legislation without really consulting with them, without getting the endorsement of the 2 unions who have to administer it. And it in a lot of ways, John, it just doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, I think it's a move to, hey, let's try and stem the participation issues. I think it starts there. And let's make sure that we not have announcements on 4A school not having girls basketball this year because they don't have enough kids to go out for it. So I think it's driven by that. It's also driven, I think, by the fact of, hey, I've got a talented 8th grader who could probably have played up. I think there's always some of that. And in some rare cases, you're going to have that. And so I think it's dual fold. But Chad, I also think it's also somewhat driven by administration. I foresee that 7th grade sports in Iowa, like many other sports, will no longer be state sanctioned. Now, that's my prediction.
Yeah.
Don't know when it'll happen, but in other states it's happened where high school sports is only 8th through 12th. And I hope it doesn't happen in this state, but this kind of is a first step towards that, I think.
And the next argument I heard about it, which is, this really won't affect football. No one's going to put a 13-year-old on a football team. And I thought, are you serious? Are you dead serious? Meskwaki Settlement showed up at Gladbrook Rhinebeck last year for week 1 of 8-man football. They had 10 players on their roster. On their entire varsity roster, Meskwaki Settlement had 10 players. One kid got concussed in the first quarter, and they had 9 players in a game in which they lost 73-6. Okay. You're telling me Meskwaki Summit didn't have any eighth graders who could play football? They wouldn't have been on that varsity roster. Somewhere in this state, this fall, there is going to be a 13-year-old on a varsity football team who is going to get laid out by an 18-year-old. And you can't tell me it's not going to happen, because it is, because there's so much 8-man football in this state. And by the way, an eighth grader playing varsity more than likely is not going to be 260 pounds and playing offensive line. An eighth grader playing varsity is going to be a running back or a linebacker or a receiver or a defensive back. He's going to be in a position where there's going to be some serious high-speed impact contact with him and a varsity senior.
Yeah, I agree. That's a big fear we were talking about before we hit record. I hope that the way they've couched it is they're going to have to be approved for physical and be approved for the sport. But I hope that doesn't happen. But Chad, at some point, that is a real probability. And I think that's scary. And I think the other thing that you made a really good point on is the news just came out. We've got it's June 21st today. Got about 2.5 months to figure this out before kids, maybe even 2 months before they hit the field. It's not a lot of time for the associations and all the athletic departments to get up to speed.
It's going to be unique. And I get it. We're the 25th state to do this, which again is wild to me, because if you know anything about Iowa history, Iowa has never been a follower in high school sports. Iowa's been a leader in high school sports. When Title IX was passed in 1970, many states across the country had no girls' high school sports. Iowa had girls' high school sports for 50 years in 1970. When most states had none, Iowa had been playing girls' basketball for 50 years at that point. Iowa has always been a leader when it comes to high school sport, not a follower. And I get it. These associations, and this is an association thing, this is a Board of Education thing, but every state has some weird stuff when it comes to high school sports. I was in Kansas City when Missouri passed their weird multiplier rule as a way to punish the private schools and move them up classes. I was in Kansas City when Kansas plays their 6 state championship football games at 6 different sites, ensuring that the crowd at every game is about the same size as the crowd at a Grundy Center, Dike, New Hartford regular season game. I was in Nevada when all 34 schools in Las Vegas were in the same conference. They're still in the same conference, just 2 divisions now, but 34 high schools, 1 conference. So every state does some weird things. This is weird to me on the way it went down, on the way it wasn't endorsed by the Girls and Boys Union, on the way we're dumping it on the schools. And listen, we got some great athletic directors in the state, all over the state. We really do. Yep. And they will figure it out. And this will probably work itself out in 3 or 4 or 5 years. But the way it's gone down is dumb. And I wish we were taking a better look at sharing programs. And this is the thing they don't want to talk about. There's a reason why schools won't share programs, John, when it's very easy to do. Here's why they won't do it. Some schools won't do it. 20 years ago, I'm not going to name the schools. 20 years ago, one school needed to join another school for high school golf. The second school okayed it. 2 golfers came from the old school to the new school. But you have to count both enrollments of both schools, even though it was 2 golfers came from one school to the other. It moved the school taking the 2 golfers up a class. The 2 kids who came over never played varsity. They weren't good enough to make the varsity golf team.
Yep.
But they were on the roster. So the school now had to take them in, or did take them in, goes up a class, loses the state championship, but shoots a score that would have won the state championship in the class they were supposed to be in.
Yeah.
And so they say, never again. We're never going to do this again because it bumped us up a class. That's why schools are not as eager to always do sharing agreements, because if you want to be in 1A and suddenly you're in 2A, you're a small 2A, and it gets a lot more competitive. And so now what we're doing is we're saying, okay, we're going to take 8th graders. We're not going to count their enrollment to make sure they're eligible, by the way. They don't have to pass their classes and they can
No,
play.
they don't.
They just have to be in 8th grade. They just have to show up for school every 3rd day and they can play varsity sports. There's no rules on them. There's no enrollment count on them. So if you're Waukee Northwest, how many 8th grades feed into Waukee Northwest?
Geez, a ton, right? It's
Well, that's a
one
lot
of the
of
biggest schools in
kids.
the state. Yeah.
That's a lot of kids. Cedar Falls has got, in basketball, has 4 basketball teams for 7th and 8th grade. 4 separate teams of all 7th and 8th graders. You're not telling me there isn't a bunch of 8th graders at Cedar Falls? Now, there's only probably 40 kids in 8th grade in Grundy Center.
Yeah.
It's not going to impact them as much.
Yeah.
It's so not thought out, and it's been so dumped on the 2 unions, and they're going to say all the right things. And again, it may work itself out. It really might. But there already are measures in place like sharing that could fix some of this.
Yeah. Yeah.
And,
Yeah,
and maybe I haven't dug enough into it, John, but it boggles my mind the way we're doing this.
Yeah, I agree. And bringing programs together, there's a hydraulic pressure to do it. Schools are going to continue to add more what I would call letters. There's going to be more of the multi-letter schools. It's demographics. Fewer kids can't support it. But what ends up happening is you've got 2 ADs, you got 2 coaching staffs, you got 2 communities. They're going to hold on as long as possible because you got people involved, you got jobs involved, you've got vested interest. And this is a way to extend them holding on when bringing them together long-term is going to be the path. You live in Waterloo area. Waterloo finally bit the bullet and brought East and West together. They needed to do it forever. But it took them 10 years longer because there was a long hold-on period. And I think this just helps the hold-on period. And Chad loves high school sports like no one else. But the reality of it is there's going to be less high school teams in Iowa in 10 years. Whether you like it or not, I think it's time to maybe move some of those issues instead of just putting a Band-Aid on something that needs a tourniquet.
And that's the funny thing is Iowa has a long history of closing high schools. That isn't a new thing. There are currently 340 roughly varsity programs in Iowa. Do you know how many high schools have closed in the last 150 years in Iowa? 1,000. 1,000 high schools have closed in the last 150 years since education started in this state. There's 340 now, but 1,000 high schools have closed. And you can say, oh, that's a small thing. Yeah, BCLUW used to be 5 high schools, and now it's 1. It's a small town thing. You want to say it's a small town thing? Let me tell you something. Des Moines West was the original football powerhouse in Iowa. Des Moines West High School. Haven't heard of it, have you? Because it closed in 1940. Cedar Rapids Regis, Waterloo Orange, Waterloo Central. Heard of these schools? They've been long gone.
Yep.
Long gone. Look up Des Moines West sometime. They were a powerhouse in football, a powerhouse from the 1900s to the 1940s. And they're long gone. It's now merged into Des Moines East. But they were a powerhouse. This is happening at all levels that we're closing schools. And so you're right. We have a participation problem. It's a birth rate problem.
Yes.
I don't know, making 8th graders give up junior high and play varsity is the right solution.
Yeah, I don't either. I do think that both unions will be thoughtful about it, both the girls and the boys. I think there are going to be more 8th grade girls participating in 8th than in boys initially. And I do have that fear of, oh man, I hope to not see an 8th grader coming around the outside, getting lit up by an 18-year-old linebacker in football. I pray that coaches and schools are smart about that. I would rather them not field a team and combine with someone before that happens.
Well, and before, I know I'm on my soapbox. I get this way when I talk about high school sports. So before anybody listening is thinking, who is this middle-aged lunatic in this wild shirt who knows nothing about junior high sports? By the way, I refereed roughly 100 junior high football, basketball, and lacrosse matches in the past year. So I've seen these kids First up. And yeah, I've seen some big kids. I saw a couple of 8th graders at Cedar Falls that I think could have played for their varsity last year, and they went undefeated and won the state championship. But I also saw some really tiny kids on those same teams that are 4 years away from being on the varsity. So there's the 1 in 100 kid who can play up, and maybe that's all it'll happen at most levels. It'll be the 1 in 100 kid helping out. But I covered Columbus Catholic last year in softball, and they were starting 4 8th graders. And they're getting beat up. They're great kids, and they're getting a lot of experience. And maybe in 3 years, they'll be pretty competitive. I would hope so. But you also risk maybe you burn them out because they got their brains beat in as 8th graders over and over again.
Yeah, Chad, I think as this goes forward, I think one thing for us to watch too is that 7th and 8th grade issue that I mentioned, where 7th grade becomes non-associated with the junior high. I coached football and basketball when I was down in Georgia. I coached 7th grade, but I also coached in the high school program. In 7th grade, we were affiliated with the school. We were paying the school to use the gym and the football field and everything. We were a revenue source for them, but they didn't have to pay us anything. We were outside the full association. So I can see things like that. Kind of makes fiscal sense to me long term. And I think this might accelerate some of that. I don't think that's the reason they did it, but I do think that things like that are potential outcomes down the road for Iowa.
I think you're right. I think that's definitely a possibility. But when we talk about girls basketball and what could fix it, and one of the best solutions I've heard is carry that smaller ball that they stopped playing with in 5th grade, let it go all the way through junior high, the smaller girls ball.
Yeah.
And that way they find more success. They're making more baskets. It fits their hand better. But now you're saying, no, 8th graders, now you with even smaller hands, you're going to play with a varsity ball. There's solutions. I just think about junior high football versus high school football. It is so different. It's so different. And they're also saying if you play 8th grade, if you're on the varsity as an 8th grader, you can't also play junior high. Now, I don't know how much they're going to let them go back and forth. That's the next thing. Because once again, the Board of Education passed a rule and said, here it is. Figure it out.
Yeah.
And so there's zero guidance.
Yeah.
And then if you follow it all the way through, and you and I talked about this, and we can talk about it now. If you follow it through, there was a second ruling that if you transfer schools,
oh yeah,
it goes from 90 days to 140 days. You have to sit out if you don't actually move. And that one made me laugh out loud, John. I'm going to tell you why. Easy it is to get a fake address in a new town. No one's sitting out 140 days.
No.
You can rent an apartment and be eligible immediately,
yeah.
And the state's not going to do anything about it. So if you're a kid who gets caught having to sit out 140 days on a transfer, then someone's not guiding you right, because it is so easy to get around the transfer rules. It's unbelievable.
I think I found that one funny. That's like the government coming in and saying, we're going to fix the NIL and transfer portal, which is going on right now. And they're like, we're going to do a symbolic gesture and move it from 90 to 140 days, which is interesting because I was looking at that and I'm like, okay, basketball is probably an area that's going to happen a lot. So if a kid does it by the rules and they don't move, okay, and they want to move, let's say here in Waukee from one school to another or go over to Urbandale. Now, if they follow the rules and they don't move, they got to wait April, May, June, July, and into August, or they're going to miss all that summer stuff, the June, July, August. So I think what will happen is those that follow the rules are going to declare right away, maybe even during the gosh darn season when they're not playing enough, right? That kid looking at the clock may go, you know what, I got to get out now so I can participate in summer basketball. I think it it doesn't solve the problem. And I'm not necessarily even saying it's a problem with kids transferring. I'm all for that if a kid has legitimate reason to try and further their thing. But I don't think it solves a gosh darn thing when it comes to transfers.
Again, and who am I punishing here? I'm punishing public school kids.
That you are.
I can send my kid to Beckman Catholic right now, right? I don't have to move to Dyersville, do I? To send my kid to Beckman Catholic? A heck of a drive, but I don't have to move to Dyersville.
Nope.
We're punishing public school kids again. And I'm not anti-private school. Am I pro-public school? Probably, because I'm a product of the public school system.
Sure.
But it just drives me nuts. I love high school sports. Don't get me, because I'm on this soapbox. Don't get me wrong. I love high school sports. You go ask somebody they like high school sports, they might say, I like Waukee Northwest, or I like Grundy Center, or I like BCLUW. I like all high school sports. Every sport they play at every school they play it. I'm a guy who's broadcast high school rodeo, high school gymnastics, high school swimming and diving, and every other sport that high schools offer. I love high school sports. I want the best for them. I just don't think we went about this the right way. And I am hoping and praying that the two state associations and all the fantastic athletic directors who are unbelievably overworked, but all they are so great across this entire state. I hope they can sort this out and make it work to help their programs and help these kids, because the way it was handed down and the way it was done was not pretty and was not clean.
Yeah, Chad, I agree. I have faith that people will be reasonable about it. I hope there aren't what I call bad decisions or a kid gets hurt during this because they're not physically ready. I'm hopeful that will not occur. I do think it's an abrupt change that causes more change. And usually when you have an abrupt change, lots of decisions have to be made. Some of those are going to be good. Some of those are going to be like, oh, we shouldn't have done that, and they got to go back. But I think this is another big change agent when it comes to high school sports. It's going to be interesting to follow to see if it works out. I'm not sure how it's going to work out. I'm hopeful it'll work out for the best.
And me too. I hope it works out. I really do, because again, my bread and butter is high school sports. I love it to death. I can go to high school games 5-6 nights a week and be thrilled, and never go to a college or a pro game in the rest of my life. And it wouldn't affect me if I could go to high school sports every night. I love it that much. And I love the coaches. I love what they're doing. But I want this to go well. It's going to go bad. Anything else the government does at any level, in any capacity, it's going to go bad first. Then there'll be some kind of, we'll fix this, tweak this, do this. It'll be better down the line. But no matter what the government does, if they want to repave a road, what do? They wreck the road first, then they repave it. That's what the government does. So this will get wrecked for a little while, and then we'll repave it, and hopefully the repaved road is pretty good.
I agree. I think it's a great topic. Anytime we're talking about high school sports in this state is great. And hopefully this fall, they will manage this in a way that sets up for another great year. So, Chad, it's been a great discussion. I'm sure it won't be the last of it.
No, we're going to see some definite impact going forward. And we know that school sharing works, but it works the best, obviously, at the 5A level. Because first of all, every single swim program shares. Cedar Falls has got kids from Dike, New Hartford, and from Waverly, and from Independence on the swim team. It doesn't affect them class-wise, so they can do it very easily. We've got to find a way to do school sharing better, where we're not counting the entire student body and this entire student body together because two kids don't have a girls basketball program there, but want to join this one over here. There's got to be a way to, then let's just count the girls, or let's just count the two classes that those two kids, or the one class those two kids are in. We don't have to count the entire school because two girls want to play girls basketball at this other school because they can't play at their own. There's better ways to do that. Let's fix school sharing programs and make them stronger before we keep going down this road, or we're going to suddenly say at one point, hey, fifth graders can play varsity sports. Let's not do that. Let's do some things with some common sense.
Yeah. Hey, and there's some fifth grade parents out there in Iowa that think Johnny and Jenny can play softball and baseball at the highest levels. So let's help them avoid that, not bring that illusion to truth.
Well, that, John, you know that's the dark secret here. The thing nobody wants to talk about is what's happening is these club coaches are in parents' ears about how great their athlete is, even though it's just to keep collecting money from them.
Yeah.
But you've got a bunch of summer league coaches, AAU coaches, club coaches, putting that in their ears. Hey, if your kid comes and plays for me, they could go pro. And they're just trying to keep collecting that money. So now these parents are thinking, hey, my kid's good enough to go pro. They need to be on the varsity as an 8th grader.
Sure. Yeah. And Chad, one last thing, and I'm sure I will cut this a little shorter, but one last thing I would add is...
Don't you dare cut me, John Gunderson. Don't you dare.
But one last thing I would add is one of the reasons I think it will go 8th through 12th is in Georgia, my example. If your kid's in junior high sports and with affiliated to the high school in Georgia, it's 5x the cost of what it is when they go to 8th grade.
Yeah.
Because you're playing club level fees to play 7th grade football. So there is an economic driver. Youth sports is a business. Let's be real.
Yeah.
In every state, there's an economic driver. 7th grade sports is one higher level for clubs, and it's a huge moneymaker. So that interest level will eventually creep all the way up, and it's already creeping all the way up. So that's why I think long-term, that could be an outcome of this. 7th grade sports, there's economics behind it, there's drivers behind it, and there's cost savings for the schools. And as you said, the schools aren't getting budget increases, they're getting budget decreases. So you got to cut costs somewhere, don't you?
Yeah, they're not getting funded like they should. And it's unreal, but yeah, I hope it works out. I love high school sports. I love Iowa high school sports. I love it all. And I want these kids to be able to do well. I love going and cover them. I just came off one of the most exciting girls' state soccer tournaments you've ever seen. One semifinal game and the championship game went to penalty kicks. The other semifinal game went to double overtime. It doesn't get any better than that in high school sports. And by the way, there's no 8th graders in any one of those 3 teams. And we had a great girls' state soccer tournament. So I want high school sports to do well. I really do. I hope this works out. I trust the leadership at the 2 unions. We'll work this out. There's going to be some bumps. There's going to be some people who disagree with me. There's going to be some people who think I'm a complete lunatic, and that's fine. That's your opinion. You can have that. But I'm in the thick of this every day. I'm in high school sports every day. And if you're in it every day, if you're an AD or a coach and you think I'm a lunatic, hey, I'm all respecting that. That's why I'm talking like this, because I care this much about high school sports and wanting to see these kids and these coaches succeed and represent their community.
That's great, Chad.
All right, John, we'll wrap it up because I can go on for another 2 hours. Thanks for watching this edition of High School Huddle. We really appreciate it. For our producer extraordinaire, John Gunderson, I am Chad Harberts. Have a great night, everyone.